Hello everybody, it's me, and I'm back to do another one. This one is it's a real beauty. This one goes out to all my friends in South Carolina. This is basically, it was basically carrying on a little thinking sesh last night, didn't I? Absolutely crazy. And 1:46 in the morning. Oh, look at me burning the wick at both ends, and what's the fucking phrase? Right. EM waves in different dimensional spaces. Traditionally, when picturing waves in a two-dimensional space, if one uses a water bath as an example, the two dimensions making up the plane propagate along the surface of the water for one axis and upwards for the other axis, so that a two-dimensional subject. So that to a two-dimensional subject, the wave would appear to be a singular line undulating up and down. However, if we imagine the plane to be made of one axis along the surface of the water and the other axis perpendicular to this, but also along the surface of the water, 90 degrees to the first, a two-dimensional subject would experience the wave as literal waves, more like individual fronts of a wave hitting intermittently, with a short period of calm in between. Similarly, in 3 dimensions, we often visualize waves propagating outwards as rings on a flat surface. Although I think I have heard people speak of it as more like fluctuations of contraction and expansion, which is more accurate. I started that sentence and didn't finish it in the way that you would expect, given the way I started it. Anyway, but sometimes we envisage rings propagating out from a centre. Rings, not spheres. I think what we actually experience is expanding spheres. Much like the two-dimensional subject feels the force of one wave, then silence, we in 3 dimensions experience one sphere, then a momentary silence, then the next. Perhaps each sphere, you kind of get, if you feel the front of the wave, if that makes sense. Anyway, perhaps each sphere is what we refer to as a photon. What's interesting is that in order to visualize a 2D wave in 3 dimensions, you draw lines at right angles to all points on the wave and end up with a classic ring-like wave. Well, I'm not sure you quite do, because it ends up going in rings, so if it was right angles, it just goes straight on forever. Anyway, if you're imagining the traditional 2 dimensions with one pointing upwards out of the water bath. However, if instead you imagine the version on its side, and do the same extrapolation, so when both the two-dimensional plane is lying flat on top of the surface instead of one axis coming out of the water, you're left with a more sphere-like structure. Not sure you are actually, but anyway. Maybe the link between the electric field and the magnetic field is even more connected than we thought, even though I think most people say that they're the same thing. They are literally the same field, but exist in a higher dimension, or not, I don't know. And if you were the two-dimensional subject and were to try and get a look at if you were the 2D subject and were to try and get a look at the source of the waves in the example where both planes are on the surface of the water, and assuming I'm making the waves with my finger, the source, my finger, would simply seem to be appearing and disappearing as if by magic, much like electrons seem to do. I don't think I really talked about what I wanted to talk about. I don't think I used the right words there. Not the right words. Basically, you just, the old water bath experiment where you make waves, I think with like a bobbing, and just some water bath. And then if you picture a 2D wave, the traditional electromagnetic spectrum just goes up and down like what does it look like? Well, kind of zigzaggish, but more like a fucking something. But that's only if you take the plane with one axis pointing out the water. If you were to flip it, but you're doing two dimensions of a 3-dimensional space, so why not take the 2 dimensions? Well, you can take them at any angle, I guess, but if you take them when it's as if it was lying on its side, the same one you were doing, but lying on its side, then you just have fronts. Well, actually, I'm not sure you would, but you'd experience it more like fronts of a wave, and then, well, like the contraction and then expansion thing. And then so it stands to reason. Well, if you go down to 1D, then the only way a one-dimensional being would be able to experience the wave would be feeling it, not feeling it, feeling it, not feeling it, or... I don't know. I just feel like that's how photons are. Fuck. I haven't described this at all well. Hang on. Slow down, Ollie. What's the best way to put this? basically, I think just like a 2D subject experiencing 3D waves would make sense of them in 2 dimensions. And you'd be able to find a representation that made sense in 2D, which would be the... Would it be the one? Will you draw and represent it? I don't know. I reckon we might be experiencing 4D waves, but we can only see a 3-dimensional cross-section of it, which is why there's some funky stuff. But yeah, maybe maybe the word wave has a specific meaning that I'm avoiding. I don't know. Thought there was more to this than what I've written here. Oh, there was also another thing that I might have read yesterday, but I can't quite remember, so I'm just going to say it again anyway. Oh, I didn't say this. What if there's another time dimension? I was trying to work out how that would manifest itself in reality. I was trying to picture like if you just narrow it down to one. If you had a universe where there's one spatial dimension and 2 time dimensions, what would that look like? On a graph, you could have a point travelling through space at a uniform speed, but that would imply time anyway. So you just have a space dimension on the x-axis and a time dimension on the y-axis and also in the z-axis. Then as it was going through space and time, it could propagate through one time dimension at a different rate to another time dimension, and I don't know how that would seem to any... I don't know I can't imagine what that would be like. I don't know if it's impossible or not. Anyway, the thing I'm not sure if I read yesterday was, I wonder if there's anything to the ideas of everything behaving like a scaled up or down version of its parts. Atoms make molecules, which make cells, which make organisms, etc. But in many ways, molecules behave like atoms, and then cells behave like molecules, organisms like cells. Perhaps if you keep going long enough, planets become organisms, scale up or down or whatever, and they're cells. And again, and then scale up again or down, and planets are atoms. Eventually, life on Earth should spread throughout the universe. Well, not humans, I hope. AGI would be doing that, come on. Will the universe become an organism, a cell, an atom in a universe where universes are the atoms? Maybe the time frame scales with size. Processes like cellular communication take some function of time relative to the size of the object. Very fast on an actually cellular or traditionally cellular level. Very slow, or rather take a long time, on a planetary scale. That sounds like a load of bullshit, really, doesn't it? Back to the fucking 3D wave shit, man. I guess there is probably either you can conduct some kind of maths experiment or physics experiment to prove it. I wonder if any of the math equations that we know about 4D, or maths in 4 dimensions, correspond to the way electromagnetic waves behave. I don't know. I'm guessing quantum theory is probably a little bit better than me saying, why don't you turn the old wave demonstration on its side. Fuck, there was more to it though. Fucking hell. See, that's what happens when you write things at 1:30 in the morning. 1:45 in the morning. You don't quite get it all down the way you mean to. Fuckaroonie. Fuckaroonie after he's crashed his car because he drink driving. Oh man, just give me a second. I'll come up with something. So the whole spheres thing, just like if you imagine a sun, in the centre of the sun we have the old electrons bouncing around. Oh yeah, maybe this would explain why. Well, it wouldn't explain. There was another thing I was thinking about, just how photons supposedly bounce around inside the sun and then leave, and I wondered why it always seems that they seem to travel straight. If they were bouncing around for so long, why wouldn't, and they would bounce around in all different ways, why wouldn't they bounce out at an angle sometime? And maybe what we're always seeing is just the average, because obviously when you get billions and trillions, or however, there's probably a number of, I can't even imagine how many photons are coming out of the fucking sun. If you have that many, then you're not going to be able to notice the small dilations in angle of each individual photon. Anyway, but I thought maybe another way to explain it would be as if photons were actually spheres, so it goes the whole way around, and then they expand, and they're still getting trapped by the gravity of the sun. So I guess that's not really it's not the gravity that's on. I mean, that'll make it a black hole, but they're bouncing around supposedly by bouncing off particles or whatever. So they could still be bouncing around, but just contracting and getting bigger and contracting and getting bigger inside the sun. And then eventually, when they finally do get to the surface of the sun, they expand equally outwards in all directions because they're a fucking sphere. Yeah. So I wonder if it could be a 4D, something that's occurring in 4 dimensions, and that maybe that explains why electrons seemingly just teleport from one orbital to another, because they go into a different dimension and come back somehow. I don't know how it works. I'm making it up. I'm just a crazy guy. What about the little thing there? I was going to say something. I had something. I got back to a little thing that I was going to say. If you just picture the sun and then a sphere coming out of it, and then a sphere around that sphere, and a sphere around that sphere, and each photon we detect is one of those spheres. Obviously, we don't detect the whole sphere. You probably detect a fucking part of it or something. I don't fucking know. But it might explain why they appear to behave like particles, because there's distinct gaps between the wave fronts. Or there would be if it was true. I think maybe not. And then, wow, I've managed to drag this one out by fucking going all the time. Fuck, man. Shit. I had thought about it in a good way, and it made sense to me, and I think it still does make sense. But I want it to make a lot more sense than I'm making it make sense. Fine, I'll try and do the maths. Maths idiot is going to try and do some maths, or I'll think of an experiment to test my hypothesis. That's what I'm going to do, like some kind of science wanker. So how would you do? What experiment could I do? I've got to try and disprove the theory. Well, if it was a 4-dimensional thing, then something would happen and I can test whether that happens. And if it doesn't, then fuck. I'll try and think of something. Does it just not seem that way though? Then it's not really like I know like light travels in straight lines, but I feel like that's just, if you can cut off part of the sphere, but then the rest of it carries on. Fuck. I guess I could try and look at how this would interfere with the whole wave particle duality double slit experiment, see if there's anything to do to it. But I've only ever seen it done in like 2D. Well, no, it's done in 3D, but you're looking at it like it's the fucking water bath experiment with rings propagating. Oh fuck, man, fuck. I already said this ages ago. I already said pretty much this exact idea. It's like 4D, and then I tried to come up with an experiment where you do the double slit experiment, but with loads of holes around a fucking light bulb. Oh man, there's something to it. You fucking watch me. I just feel like the most damning evidence against it is the fact that I've never heard any smart person say it. So there you go. No actual physicist seems to have ever said it. And if they have, maybe they disproved it, and maybe that's why I haven't heard it. Either way, whatever. I've put it out in the world for no one to see ever. There we go. And I can, if anyone ever says it, and it turns out that it hadn't been said before, and it turns out to be real, then I can show them this video, and then they'll be like, oh my god, he got there first. Why didn't we listen to him? Why didn't we listen to that idiot with his crazy, wacky ideas? Alright, that'll do.